Doing a bunch of videos here, really exciting. Pace Morby, thank you for being here. All creative financing. In the first video, we kind of did a big overview. Then we talked about some of the instruments and the terminology in video 2. Really important that you watch this in order. I think once we get to the strategies, you can jump around there. But it's the first one that you really want to learn and understand and do well with. And that's what we call seller financing or owner financing. Sometimes we call it owner carry, or you'll even hear people say a carry back or install.
So basically, these two guys are apparently pretty famous. I will be honest, this is the first time I'm watching their YouTube videos. I can tell that they're both very popular just based on the number of comments under the video and the number of people who are saying that they think these two are geniuses. So I started to watch this because I'm interested. I'm a real estate agent in Dallas, Texas, and I'm interested in learning about more creative financing deals because I will be honest, I'm ready. I know the market well enough in the Dallas-Fort Worth area of Texas that I'm ready to start doing my own deals. It's just I don't have the initial capital. So I'm stuck kind of in this process of seeing a lot of sellers who are interested in selling, but not knowing how to help them truly. So I'm starting to watch these two people so I can become a better realtor and a better investor and maybe help a few people along the way, whether they're sellers or investor buyers. So these two are going to talk about seller financing, and they're going to, this is probably one of the best videos I've seen on seller financing personally. Not that I've seen a lot, but let's see how they're going to explain it. I've watched this video once. I was really impressed with it, and I want to kind of just point out a few things as we go along. Some of them I agree with, some of them I kind of question, but nevertheless, obviously those two people they know what they're doing. I wonder how they do some of the things. They make it sound very easy, but in reality, I know that nothing is very easy when you get to the nitty-gritty of it. So let's see how they explain it. I'm going to skip around quite a bit because this video is almost 50 minutes long. I'm not going to spend 50 minutes recording this. So I'm going to skip the parts that I thought were very interesting and comment on those.
Installment sale. So you're going to hear with this property, which we're not going to disclose the address.
We will not, but I do own it to this day.
Okay.
Offer that
50
grand, $10,000. She says yes. And I go, and I meet with Dale and Susan Boyer, amazing people, friends of mine at this point. And I go, so Susan, tell me this. You want $110,000? She says yes. And I go, where'd you get that number from? She says, I saw it on Zillow. I go,
so this is a very common conversation with sellers. He is giving an example of how he explains owner financing to somebody who doesn't really understand the concept. And what I like about the way that he's going to go about it is he's taking this complicated concept of seller financing, and he's going to give an example of something that the seller can easily understand. And using that easy understanding, he then convinces them to try it and be brave to try something new. Also, what I like about this situation is that he pretty much gives the entire script, the way that he goes about bringing the seller to the idea that seller financing is the best way for them, whether it's really the best way or not. Let's see what he says.
yeah, great. I'm glad you didn't lie about it, because some sellers say, oh, my neighbor this, my whatever. She goes, oh, Zillow told me. I go, okay, so I imagine with all the other investors, including the person that brought me here, and I called this person out, right, the meeting, everybody's probably offering you 40 grand, 50 grand, 60 grand. She goes, the highest offer we have is $57,000. I go, it doesn't surprise me, because
actually this is a very good technique. So he doesn't know what are the offers that the seller already has in their hands. So instead of asking what is the highest offer that you received so far, and her kind of starting to hedge, like, give me your best offer or something like that, he does a smarter thing, and he said, I would imagine that you're already receiving offers that are 50, 60. And he kind of gives this range, 50 to 60, because he knows what offers she's probably getting. And instead of telling him, well, give me your number, she actually lets it slip. So it goes very kind of smooth, and in the way that he performs it, it's almost like as a matter of fact. But in reality, he makes a very smart move. I am definitely going to take this as part of my arsenal next time. I'm trying to figure out how much somebody has, what kind of offer somebody has in their hands.
If I was going to offer you cash,
I'd be in the same ballpark.
I'd be in the same ballpark. And at that point, it's who's the better negotiator, who can close faster, who do you think is credible? And at that point, that's the only advantage I have in a cash scenario, Susan. And she goes, wait, but you're not offering me cash. I go, no, I'm not going to offer you cash. I said, and write this down. This is the line I use to go from a cash conversation to a creative conversation. It's very simple. And it's meant and structured this way on purpose to trip the seller up very subtly. So I go, Susan, I'm going to offer you terms. I will come up to your price. Okay. I will come up to your price, telling her price is too high. That's a psychological thing. I would be willing to come up to your price if you would give me terms. That's the line. Yep. Most sellers don't know what terms are. And so that's where I tell the F-150 story. Okay, so
then she says, what are terms?
She goes, what are terms?
Okay, so, okay, I agree that this is a good, very good transition. Let's see what his F-150 story is. I've never heard it before. As I said, I'm just now starting to watch this too. But when he told the F-150 story, I was like really impressed. Let's see how he explains it.
Yeah, exactly. So you want to get the seller to go, what are terms? And then give them a very real life scenario that everybody understands. So I go, well, here's what terms are, Susan. I used to own a construction company, and in that construction company, I had...
I'm actually not going to go through the whole F-150 story. If you guys want to watch, I'm going to put a link to his, I'm going to put a link to this whole video, the original video that they do have. I'm going to put a link to it in the description below. The F-150 story literally takes like 10 minutes. I don't want to take 10 minutes, but the bottom line is that well, actually, let's do it. I told you that he uses a very good way to put it in layman terms, and I guess this is actually the key to the successful negotiation, that the owner does not fight him on the idea. The owner gets to agree with him. So actually, I'm changing my mind. Let's watch the story, because you can see it psychologically how the owner goes from being kind of incredulous and not trusting him to actually understanding and going along with his offer. This is a very important psychological trick.
An F-150, a Ford. Everybody knows what a Ford F-150 is. It's the number one selling truck of all time. So immediately she's now painting a picture in her brain of this truck. And I go, this truck hit 320,000 miles. It started having problems, kind of like the house you're trying to sell, right? Drawing parallels. And I decided it's time to sell the truck because it's starting to have more problems than what it's worth for me. And she goes, yeah, kind of like.
So he goes into the story, and instead of launching into the numbers of the story and the gist of the story, he takes a bit of a time to paint a picture in her head. The truck was good, but it started to run a little bit. It started to get mileage. It started to have issues. And then he draws a parallel that she can relate to, just like the house that you're trying to sell. That is a very good transition, because instead of, there is a saying among realtors, it says numbers tell, but story sells. So instead of giving her the numbers that he wants her to look at, which he's going to do a few minutes later, first he tells the story to sell her, and only after he sells her, only then he's going to go into the numbers. While most people do the opposite. First they give the numbers, the person starts resisting, and then they try to come up with some kind of a story to justify the numbers. So he's doing story first, numbers second.
The house I have. I go, so I take it out of operation. My guys are no longer driving it to job sites and whatnot. And I go decide to sell it on Craigslist. So where do I find the value of a vehicle, Susan? And I ask Susan the question. I've done this 1,000 times. The sellers replied the same exact way. So I go, Susan, where do I find the value of a truck? And she goes, Kelley Blue Book. I go, so the Zillow for cars. And she goes, yeah. And I go, so you got your price from Zillow. I got my price from the Zillow for cars, Kelly Blue Book. Kelly Blue Book says my truck's worth $5,000. I'm like, I'm not freaking selling this thing for $5,000 because if I put it out there for $5,000, I'll get some wholesaler or somebody coming and lowballing me and saying all cash offer. I go, does that?
Now, what's interesting to me in this conversation is that he himself is a wholesaler. He is working with a wholesaler who brought him to this deal, but yet he doesn't hesitate to make fun and kind of speak dismissively and negatively about wholesalers, kind of showcasting like you don't want that. So he puts his wholesaler hat on and off depending on what situation he's in. From I don't know many of his videos. It's like the second video of him that I'm watching, which is based on a conversation, the way that he kind of starts to do this on wholesalers. And even though he is a wholesaler, it is his primary job to wholesale houses. And even though he is supportive of wholesalers and he trains wholesalers, the moment he's in front of a seller, he starts to diss the wholesalers. Let's continue. And notice that the second guy is almost like embarrassed a little bit. He starts to laugh, but you can tell that he's laughing in a slightly embarrassed way.
Makes sense to you, Susan? She goes, yeah, that's what's happening. I tell people I want 110,000. People are coming in and offering me 50. And I go, that's because they're trying to make money.
And rightfully so. That guy
Right.
that's coming in with cash,
He's
he
doing
can
the right
get
thing.
a deal, right? Because
Right.
he's got cash.
Right. He's got cash and you want to sell this week, you said. And if you go any other route, you're going to go 3-4 months with an agent. And you might have to clean up and repair the property.
So that's another trick that he's doing right now. Said, okay, don't take my 50K. That's fine, up to you. Kind of in so many ways, he's not saying it directly, but he's painting a picture. He said, oh, but what's your alternative, Susan? You want to clean up this house? You want to clean up this mess of yours? You want to go with an agent? You want to spend 3 months cleaning your house and then another 3 months selling? So he's kind of giving her all the negatives of not taking his offer, but not telling her, hey, if you don't take my offer, you're going to have to clean up this house. He's not bullying her like sometimes buyers tend to do. He's doing it in a more smart way. He's kind of jokingly suggesting that that's what might happen, and she's cringing while he's doing it.
And she goes, so you're not, so you didn't sell the truck. I go, no, this is what I did. I go, Susan, I'm very similar to you. I'm belligerent.
All right, so really nice, right here, big hook. Look at how he maintains eye contact with whoever. I'm assuming I'm Susan right now. And then he points at her, kind of like really engaging his body language. And he said, I'm very similar to you. I'm very similar to you. Truly brilliant in this case. If you want somebody to like you, people like to do business with people who are just like them. So by catching up on her personality, he noticed that she's abrasive. I'm assuming that that's what he noticed from the conversation. He noticed that she's assertive. He noticed that she's a little bit belligerent in the conversation. So he actually says, I'm a little bit like you. Whether or not he's really like that or not, doesn't matter. He's just saying, I'm like you, basically saying you and I, we're in the same team. We're like this and other people are stupid, okay? So very nice, very nice.
I believe my truck is worth more than it really is, just like you believe your house is worth more than everybody else believes it is. So I go on Craigslist and I list the truck for $10,000, even though Kelly Blue Book told me it was worth $5,000.
Now, he is misleading the seller at this time. What he is doing, and this is one of the reasons why all of this smooth talk is great. If you guys are wholesalers, just watch. This is a masterpiece. If you guys are not wholesalers, if you're watching it because you're trying to sell your house on cash, also watch, because what he's starting to do is he's starting to slightly mislead her. So his story was that she wanted to sell it for 110. He is not disputing that the true worth is 110. Okay, so he is starting by saying she wants 110. he said that most people who are wholesalers, who are cash offer people, are offering her between 50 and 60. 50 and 60 is not the true value of the property. The true value of the property is 110. Well, according to Zillow. Let me roll my eyes. According to Zillow. Okay. We have no idea what the true value is, but she believes it's 110 because Zillow says so. Okay. He is starting to pressure her into believing that 1560 is the true value. Notice in this scenario, he says, the true value of my truck is 5K according to Blue Book. So he's mixing up her mindset. The true value of her house, the Blue Book value, is 110, not 50. And he's saying that he wants to get more than the true value, so he doubles. So the Blue Book said that it's 5,000, and he doubles it to 100, to 10,000, which is not what she's doing. So first he creates equivalency, saying we're similar, I have a similar situation with a truck. And then he takes a couple of similar situations, keeps talking like a snake. And then he throws in a false fact. And a false fact is that her true value, her Blue Book value is 50, which it is not. But she swallows it and continues on.
Did I sell that truck, Susan? She goes, no. I go, I didn't even get a call, a text, a smoke signal, like no, but nothing. I didn't even get somebody to text me and go, are you freaking out of your mind trying to sell this thing for 10?
Now, also, if you notice the body language of the second dude, whatever his name is, and his facial expressions, he's slightly uncomfortable because he is understanding the trick that this dude is pulling on him, on a seller. He's like, his body language is constantly slightly shielding himself. That's why he's holding his leg like this and leaning back. So notice this guy's leaning forward. He's really engaged. This guy's kind of leaning back, almost like distancing himself a little bit. And also he's like, he's constantly slightly embarrassed. I cannot say whether he's slightly embarrassed for the seller for swallowing this lie, or he just slightly embarrassed for something else, but his body language is slightly uncomfortable in this case.
Nothing, like literally nothing. So my wife comes up to me, I'm sitting at my desk, and my wife comes up to me one morning, she goes, hey, sweetheart, I have to keep driving around this F-150 every morning for the last 3 months. Are you going to sell this thing anytime soon? And I look up at my wife, and I'm like, what do you want me to do? I'm not going to just let somebody lowball me. I want the number I want.
Okay, so again, he keeps switching up the values. His true value, according to his own story of his truck, is 5K. And people are offering him 5K or slightly less, and he called it lowballing. While in reality, they're giving him full price. They're not lowballing him. So he is completely messing up her understanding of value.
And I go,
And also, guys, if you're ever trying to sell and you're dealing like somebody with this guy in this plaid shirt, and you're not a professional investor, please have an agent by your side. Because if I was sitting next to Molly or Sally, I'd keep looking at him, and then I would take him out and say, hey, stop this BS. This is not fun, or this is not right. But because she has nobody, her husband who's sitting next to her, apparently swallowing in the same way that she does the story, and he's basically taking his hook and putting that hook further and further into this lady's mindset. Doing it quite artfully, kind of laughing, but notice how he is not laughing. He is stone cold. He got his game. I must say, he's a good negotiator. He's a really good negotiator. Let's continue to learn. So he's about to convince this lady that the story that he told her actually makes sense, which it doesn't slightly. But let's
So
continue.
Susan, does that resonate with you? And she says, yeah, actually, I totally understand your pain.
See? Yeah, that's how it happens.
So my wife suggests to me, Susan, much like
She's actually being scammed right now, in a way. Her mindset is being twisted.
I'm going to suggest to you. She says, why don't you let somebody make payments on your truck instead of coming up with cash? And I go, oh my gosh, you're so genius. So I go back on Craigslist. I change one thing on my ad, and it was F-150 will take payments. Do you think I sold that truck for $10,000, Susan? She says, yeah, probably. And I go, I sold it for $12,500 with $1,000 down.
So the story that he's telling her, I have, a lot of questions about it. He's basically starting to inject a whole new idea of taking payments, and not only taking 10,000, what he initially planned, which is already doubled his actual blue book value. In her case, if she did that, she would be asking for 220, not 410. But also actually going above that and increasing the value by another about 10%, which in her case would be like asking for 250 and getting it. How likely that to actually happen? Like seriously, how likely? Even if he was selling a truck, a used truck with $310 mileage, selling for 110 times its worth. For this story, the way that he's telling it, it all sounds very smooth. In reality, the likelihood of that happening is probably not very high. But she's going along with the story because the numbers. So she's going along with the story not because she actually believes the story. She goes along with the story because she starts to see a way for her to make 110. So she is willing to let those what do you call logical incongruencies or logical conflicts slide, as long as she understands the point.
And Jose, the gentleman who bought it from me, paid me $350 payments every single month, and with interest included, he paid me $15,000 over 4 years. And she says,
Okay.
wow. And I go, do you think that Jose
So you see, okay, numbers tell, story sells. So he just sold her using this Jose character. He just sold her on an idea of monthly payments.
paid for that truck? She goes, absolutely he did. I said, Susan, I want you to remember something.
I must say, Susan is either slightly dumb or she's very impressionable. However, I see so many people sending money to African kings and princes who have their gold buried somewhere in the mountains and they need $100,000 to unbury it. If people fall for the Nigerian princess story, I can believe that they would fall for a Jose story.
Value is never for me in the purchase price. The value for me is what I can do with the property. So as long as you give me terms equal to the $110,000 high price you're asking for, then I'd love to work something out with you, because Jose did not overpay for that truck. He took that $350 payment. He didn't have to get it.
Jose totally overpaid for that truck.
His credit pulled. I didn't have to look at his job history, his bank balance. I didn't have to look at anything. In fact, he was an illegal resident of the United States, and I still seller financed my truck to him. And she goes, oh, it's seller finance. I go, exactly.
See? So that is a big mistake that many people do. So when they're negotiating and they're trying to make a normal seller who wanted to sell conventional or want to sell traditional method, through traditional method, to switch to seller financing, and they bring the scary word seller financing and say, hey, I would like to see if you would be interested in seller financing deal. And the seller like, whoa, 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 hold it right there, get out of my house, all of that good stuff. Because they went in cold. They didn't warm him up first. They did the right thing from a legal standpoint. They actually did the better thing from a legal standpoint by giving him an upfront information about what he's about to get himself involved in. But they went in cold, and it's almost like trying to, you know, I would make a comparison. If you meet a girl for a date, for the first date, and you really want to go sleep with her, you know, and even before you actually sit down for dinner, you would say, hey, how about we go to my house and have like sex? And you're like, wait, hold your horses. So that's what a lot of people do during negotiation. They throw in their argument too early before the person is ready. What he did instead is he first took the seller to dinner, so to speak, and gave her a bunch of funny stories to laugh at. And only after she was at the right condition mentally, she was already excited. She was already starting to see how this could help her. Only then he introduces the idea of self-financing, because at that time she is not, she is warmed up. She is ready to engage further, so to speak. You know, he did a little bit of foreplay, so to speak, before he engaged into a more serious conversation where numbers are about to start flying. So he did good.
So
Because Jose had a use for that truck
he turned into a painting truck.
equal to what he paid. So he didn't overpay. Because
No.
he had a use for that with the financing
He
he was able to
generated
get.
$7,000 a month from that truck every single month.
Yeah, right. Okay, that story is great. So basically, he's convincing her that somebody would really overpay 2.5 times for his truck because they would make so much money with it. Okay. Basically, he's going to tell her, like, don't worry if it doesn't make sense to you. Don't worry if it doesn't make sense to you. If logically it has hiccups, don't worry. Jose got it all taken care of. As long as it works out for Jose, it should work out for you and me, basically. He's transferring the decision making from Jose to her, saying, look, Jose did this and it worked out for him. Why don't you and I do something like that? And because Jose already did it, and he kind of got social proof going on that, hey, look at that, how it worked out. Now she said, well, if Jose did it, like the fact that Jose doesn't even exist is irrelevant at this point.
Truck meant $7,000 to his company every month for a $350 payment.
So he didn't care that he
I must commend these two. They're really engaged with each other in conversation, but they still don't forget to look at the camera, which I totally suck at.
overpaid the blue book
Nope.
value.
He did not care at all. He cared that I didn't check his credit.
Okay, so another thing that they're throwing in, which is a kind of brilliant in a way, is that they said, you know what, all of these blue book values, they're irrelevant. What your Zillow says, so basically what he's telling her, what Zillow says is irrelevant. Now, if he told her what Zillow says is irrelevant at the first 5 minutes of their conversation, she would kick him out of the house and say, okay, go find yourself somebody else to talk to. I'm done with you. Because she was not ready yet. Her mindset. So everything a human can be talked into jumping into a burning building for no good reason if they're in the right state of mind. And if they're not in the right state of mind, you wouldn't even like I have a little niece and I'm trying to feed her a spoon of her favorite food, and she's like, she's not in the right state of mind yet. I can't even put a spoon of food into her mouth. Left alone convince somebody to sell their house at basically at a weird structure that it's really risky legally. But everything is possible in the right state of mind. And the right state of mind involves some kind of suspension of disbelief at this point, based on the story. Suspension of disbelief is the same way that we are still crying when we're watching a movie, even though we know that the actors didn't get really hurt during that scene, right? So she's excited for Jose, even though she knows Jose probably doesn't exist. She's excited for him for making that much money, even though she probably realized the story is all made up. So she's in the right state of mind. And now he throws in another argument. He said, who are we to judge value? Value is irrelevant. Numbers are irrelevant, that's what he says. So he's saying numbers are irrelevant. Blue book value is irrelevant. Zillow value is irrelevant. Appraisal, I guess, from his standpoint, appraisal is also irrelevant. Everything is irrelevant as long as it makes sense for you and me. The rest of it, don't worry about it, you know? And sneaky, but very artful.
He cared that he didn't have to have credit. He
Only $1,000 down.
$1,000 down. And I had to turn my ad off in 30 minutes. It was people pouring in. So if you understand what I did there, I took something I owned free and clear, and I created an agreement between me and Jose. That agreement is called a promissory note. I struck.
So see, he's starting to explain to her using the Jose story, the terms that he's going to use later on when explaining to her the structure of their deal. So very clever, very clever. I will be honest. I will probably create my own Jose story, even though I'm not a seller financer yet. I'm hoping to become, but I'm going to really take his example because very often we sit down with a seller or buyer and explain, this is the promissory note, this is your agreement, this is your offer, this is this and this and this. And when it's pointed at them, it is your promissory note, it is your agreement, this is your loan. They get kind of like, oh, I'm scared now. And what he's saying is that it didn't happen to you, it happening to somebody else, and they're happy about it. It is Jose's promissory note, it is Jose's agreement, it is Jose's down payment. It makes it understandable and at the same time not scary. Brilliant.
Structured a debt and an agreement that says, Jose.
See, he just explained to her the three primary instruments of seller financing. There will be a promissory note, there will be a debt, and then there will be negotiation of some kind of terms. He's explaining to her almost like to a child, which is really good.
You can be the owner of this property that I am now becoming the bank of. I'm now the bank of this truck, and you pay me every single month like you would pay a bank. And now I, as the seller, get to either A, have a high purchase price, or B, an interest rate, or sometimes C, both, depending on how it's structured.
Now here he's kind of going into all kind of directions. If I was him, I wouldn't go into it. Just because it looks like Pam or whatever, Molly, whoever is sitting in front of him, is not the brightest bulb, in my opinion. And by throwing in all of those additional terms, he had a chance of kind of making her intimidated. But okay, let's see how it develops.
So Susan goes, oh my gosh, I love this. I absolutely love this. I will sell to you on seller finance. I go, great.
Okay, so he just used the imaginary guy with an imaginary truck to explain to her how it's going to work between the two of them. And because it worked out so beautifully for Jose and this dude, she thinks she is fully understanding the situation and she believes that she's going to have the winning hand. Now, if you're a real estate agent or if you are a seller, just imagine anybody who is starting to tell you a story and using the story as a way to explain to you how you're going to do like what they're trying to accomplish. Become alert because these people might be a better salesperson than average. And then make sure that after you talk to this person, go through a cool down period. A cool down period means you listen to what he says, you like it, you don't like it, doesn't matter. Go and sleep on it and talk about it with somebody other than yourself. Talk about it with your mom, dad, sister, uncle, whatever. Run it by them, see if it makes sense to them. Because a salesperson, a very crafty salesperson, the way that he is, can totally scramble your brains like nothing happening.
What terms do you want? You're my bank, Susan. And she goes, I'm the bank. And she.
All right, so yeah. So in that case, I mean, if you are trying to do seller financing, and if you are the buyer, and if you're trying to structure a creative financing deal, try to make sure that there is no cool down period, because right now she's in this excited state where logic just been thrown out of the window. Killer blue book has been thrown out of the window as irrelevant. Irregular concept been thrown out of the window when this happy imaginary state when everybody is making a ton of money and 210% over their asking price. if you're a wholesaler or if you are an investor, make sure that there is no cool down period, because I'm almost certain the next morning she'll wake up and she'll say, what did I just do?
She was like so excited to be the bank, and I said, here's the reality is I'm going to upgrade you. This is another line I use all the time to get sellers very excited about.
So you see, this is the one telltale of a person who is extremely dangerous to work with, to have as a negotiation party, not on your side. Notice how his eyes are. Even though he smiles, his eyes never smile. His mouth smiles, but his eyes never smile. He's like a snake, hypnotizing his victim. So whether you're a buyer, seller, wholesaler, anytime you see this kind of like stillness in him, eyes not smiling, mouth smiling, and he's giving you a whole bunch of stories, be on high alert, go through a cool down period.
Seller finance, I go, I'm going to upgrade you from the landlord to the bank. And the lowest person in a real estate transaction is the landlord, because you're the one that gets pooped on everywhere. The tenants poop on you, the bank is making all the money.
Okay, so he throws in a couple of other arguments. He's basically saying, do not continue to own this property. You're currently an owner, you're currently a landlord. Most people would say, oh, she's a landlord, that's cool. And he's telling her, nah, you don't want to do that. The tenants poop on you, you're not making any money, the bank makes all the money. That's not true. If he's able to rent this property, so is she. So he's basically telling her, do not continue to own this property in so many ways.
You have to deal with all the contractors taking advantage of you. That is the bank. You don't have to deal with any of that. You're the one that just brings in the money, and it's truly passive. And I use the word passive. So Susan says, I love it. How am I secured? And I go, well, we're going to do the same thing I did with Jose. We're going to create a promissory note that says, I promise to pay you what's on this note, and then we're going to securitize that or make it secure against the property with a mortgage, or in Arizona, a deed of trust. You're fully secured. If I default, you can get the property back.
And again, we talked about that. That means that deed of trust gets recorded as a lien against the property in the amount of your promissory note. So in the event you default, or what I don't like to say default, that sounds really bad.
He slipped. He said default. Correct. Do not say default when if you're in a position of a guy in a plaid shirt. Do not say default. That is like a cold shower, waking up the seller to the reality of what he's negotiating right now.
I'll tell sellers. I'll say, in the event I get hit by a bus.
Yeah, I say abducted by aliens.
Susan can then liquidate the asset.
That's way lower than you thought they would accept. Or B, you now have the power to say no, and you're the person rejecting them. I always hate on a transaction where I'm sending out an offer.
Okay, so he's gonna
$50,000 over the price of everybody else.
Your next.
So he's basically going through a couple of techniques that he uses to make them make an offer first.
I'm sending out an offer and they get to say no, and I'm like, okay, well, what would work? And they just ghost you, right? So I like to be the person in that position. So Susan goes, I want $110,000. I want $20,000 down, and I want 8% interest. So my reply, this is a recorded trend. The reason why I pointed out this was a recorded conversation is because there's a lot of things I've said in this appointment that I've shared this recordings millions of times.
I've heard it. It's amazing.
It's a good one. And I go, well, Susan, I'm probably not your buyer. That's another line I use all the time. I'm probably not your buyer. And she goes, well, what do you mean? I thought you said you'd pay $110. I go, yeah, I'd pay $110, but the reality is I'm already paying $50,000 over the price of everybody else.
Your next.
So her true volume is 110, according to Zillow, quote unquote. He is using the fact that everybody is bringing her 50 as a way to manipulate her thinking, saying, I'm basically overpaying. He's not overpaying. He's paying a normal price. But in her opinion now, in her mind, he is overpaying.
Best offer.
Right. Your next best offer is $50,000.
In reality, she could just as easily listed the house, and who knows, she might have gotten 120, 130, maybe more, depending on how craftful her agent was. She could have gotten more out of this deal and received all the money up front within the next 30 days. Have she decided not to go with these cash offers and put the house in the market? Now, it is possible that she might have received less, depending on the market and depending on her property. But long story short, again, he is telling her, I'm paying you double of what everybody else does, forgetting the fact that he actually offering her a regular price, not a double.
And lower me. This is again why we start with cash first. We ascertain or obtain the information. We then can utilize that when we need to. And she says, well, where would you be? And I go, man, at 110 grand, you're already winning. You're getting full retail. I'm going to take over a tenant. This is important for this transaction. I'm going to take over a tenant, and I'm paying you top price. And she goes, okay, well, what would work for you? And I go, at that price, I'd have to have a principal only payment. That's 0% interest, by the way. I never say 0% interest to a seller. I always say principal only payment. And I would need you to pay for the closing costs.
See, this is what happens when the sellers decide to do it themselves. So sellers who decide to do it themselves are arrogant in their thinking that they don't need a real estate agent. And anytime you see sellers who are trying to do it themselves, just assume that you're dealing with people who are arrogant, thinking that they understand the negotiation, they understand the transaction. So he's taking advantage of her ignorance of how things are really done by telling her, hey, I'm in charge here now. Because I agreed to your full price, I'm in charge here now. Remember how that story with an abducted what was that movie where the Somalian pirates stopped some kind of a transportation boat, and they seized the captain, and they said, who's the captain? I'm the captain now. So that's what he did. He kind of seized her boat, and he said, I'm the captain now.
And she goes,
I'm loving this guy. He's such a BSer, but he obviously is fantastic at manipulation.
I would do that, but I at least need $10,000 down payment. I go, great, no problem. This is one of my really famous deals, by the way.
So he just talked her into 0% APR in like nothing is happening. Good for him.
So, okay, perfect. Let's agree to that. Principal only, 110. I'll take over your tenant, and the tenant thing becomes really important in a second. And you pay closing costs. She goes, great, as long as you give.
She didn't even try to negotiate. She didn't even try to object to you pay the closing costs. The closing costs, I'm just guessing, were the survey, the title policy costs, all the costs. So she just lost probably close to $2,500-$2,600, maybe $3,000 if there was a survey involved, maybe even $4,000, just like that, and she doesn't even know it.
Give me 10 grand. I'll go, perfect. Will you now seller finance my down payment?
This is becoming what is the word that's not ridiculous? How it is to say it? Ridiculous does not even start to describe it, but I am really into it because again, I plan to be an investor at some point, so I'm learning from this guy. But with my real estate hat on, I just want to tear my eyes out and think, no, somebody please help Susan.
The 10 grand. Bro, when I threw this out here, it was the first time I did a deal where the seller asked for a $10,000 down payment. And I said, well, I'll pay you the $10,000, but I got to pull it from the rent I'm receiving. So I took over a tenant that was paying $1,600. The payment to Susan, and I'm going to tell you how I came up with the payment here in a second.
So see, this story is beautiful, but eventually they're going to come to closing table. And Susan will need to pull out of her wallet and start paying for all those closing costs, for the title policy, for the survey. Susan might bolt on him once she starts to realize that all his money are hypothetical are in the future, and she needs to pay for her own costs and his costs now. I wonder if this deal will actually hold up. Apparently it did hold up. But I'm just saying, in a normal situation, doing something like that, you see, he's pushing it. He's really pushing it. Why? He actually, I think this is not a wise move. Up until now, and I'm kind of taking first taking Susan's side, and I'm going to take his side now for a moment. If I was him, I would not push for that closing costs. Why? Because Susan is in this dreamland that he created. Susan is in this warm bath of illusion that she's in a good deal. Susan swallowed the bait. He's becoming a little bit too greedy. Sometimes greed kills the deal. So, in my opinion, if Susan now has to pull out her credit card to pay for the survey, pull out her credit card or her bank checking account or write a check at closing for closing costs. Once she sees that closing statement that you owe us at the end of this closing, you owe us $3,600, for example, and he hasn't paid a penny in the transaction. I wonder if Susan will just say, sorry, not selling it to you, breaking the contract. Up until this moment, he was very smart, in my opinion, when he asked for 0% down, 0% APR. I mean, brilliant when she swallowed it, but that was pushing. And then on top of it, he's asking her to pay before he paid. And now, in my opinion, he's really setting up this transaction for a 50-50 breaking up and coming out from under the contract over those closing costs and title policy and survey. So if I was him, I would have grabbed my 0% APR and not bring up the closing costs. So the seller continues to stay in this illusion. Because right now they're dealing with hypothetical money, some kind of imaginary Jose money, but he's bringing it into a new level of escalation, where now Jose is one thing, but she now needs to pay for stuff. And that could be fatal to her view of the transaction. Not right now. Right now, she's still, but once the title company calls and say, hey, we need to order an appraisal, can we run your credit card? Or do you approve $660 appraisal fee? Or do you approve, well, actually, there's no appraisal, I'm sorry, survey. Do you approve this survey fee? And then is when she had the opportunity to wake up and say, wait a second, it's not what I thought it was.
Most people go, what spreadsheet or bankrate.com or whatever, where did you come up with the payment? And I go, here's how I came up with the payment. I found the bunnies. Her bunny, Dale and Susan, they wanted to go on an RV trip all over the country. And they said their average cost to rent out a park for a month was $375 a month. And so I said, what if my payment to you covered the cost of your RV trip every single month
The way that he calculates amortization based on the cost of their RV trip is something out of this world. I must say, when they come to a title company with this whole RV trip bunny story, I wonder if, I know that he has his own escrow officers, etc., but they still need to make amortization tables work. I'm not sure that, I guess what they're trying to do in this case is they're saying, it doesn't matter the length of the term, as long as it covers your RV payment, $330. We're going to take this amount divided by $330. This how many months is our term of our contract. That's the only way that this would work. Because otherwise the amortization table, no title company will be able to make it work.
Your rent. So essentially, this house pays for your RV spots for the rest of your life. She was like, I love that.
I must say. At first I felt good for Susan or trying to help Susan, but at this point I'm like, girl, you're on your own.
So that's where my payment came from. $375, principal only payments. Find the bunnies.
Found what the need was
Right.
by listening and understanding what the seller needs in their life. It's not just about some formula or whatever. It's about the sellers.
She looked at it like, this house is a coupon for me to never have to pay for another RV spot in the whole country the rest of my life. And I'm like, holy moly, I can't believe that I just pulled.
Yeah, I agree. Holy moly. This lady now, I guess he is using her an example of somebody who is easily led, easily twisted, easily brainwashed into the most ridiculous thing. I mean, I don't want my video or my comments to discredit the idea of self-financing. I believe that self-financing is a very powerful tool for both buyers and the sellers. But the story that he tells, and I know that he's telling it for an effect. He's telling it to you to demonstrate what kind of ridiculous terms sellers would agree to if you get them to the right mental state. But he's almost discrediting the idea of self-financing by making it look like you're basically abusing, it's an abusive practice, because what he's doing right now is actually an abusive thing to do. Because he's taking a person who has no experience, no real understanding of what she's signing up for. She obviously is not a friend of math or some kind of calculations. She's obviously not focused on the details and the logic. She's wrapped into the story. She's wrapped into this good feeling that she's having with him right now. So for him to be a professional and to go against this obviously not very experienced person and take advantage of him. Okay, he's an investor, I get that. But what he is doing is borderline abusive. And I'll be honest, if Sally ever later decided that she wanted to dispute this contract and kick him out and say that this is not the way that this was presented to me and I didn't understand what I was agreeing for, I wonder if she would have a good argument, because a jury of 12 peers would never believe that somebody in his own mind would sign up for something like that.
Pulled that off. So what happened is her tenant's paying me $1,650. I pay her $375 on a monthly basis.
So basically he's saying that there is some hypothetical scenario, and I wonder what state it is in, where a property, a mobile home that cost 110 in resale is generating 16.15 rent. Obviously, he's not in the Dallas-Fort Worth area of Texas, obviously. I'm not sure what state he's in, and I'm sure that there are some parts of the country where you could have this kind of situation, but please do not assume that this is going to be that easy if you're in the Dallas-Fort Worth area of Texas. If you're in the Dallas-Fort Worth area of Texas, that trailer may be $1,000, maybe $1,100. Depends on the location, of course. But just people who are renting this trailer probably do not even have. Otherwise, if they had $1,600, they would have gone to a better place.
Then I have insurance and some maintenance and whatever. My net cash flow on that property is $1,000 a month. So 6 months later, I paid her $5,000. Another 6 months later, I paid her $5,000.
So basically he's saying he's taking all those payments from her, adding them all together and paying for her down payment. Okay. Sure.
So my cash flow from the property she seller financed me is what paid for her down payment.
So just to recap this and make sure everyone's following this, she wanted 10 grand. You said, great.
So based on what I'm understanding, she's both in the first and the second position on this loan. I've never seen this done before. Well, actually, that's not true. That's not true. I guess I have seen it done before, but technically, this seller is both in the first and the second position on this loan.
But I'll give you 5 and 6 months and another 5 and 6 months. And then the way you paid that 5 was through the $1,000 a month cash flow. Right. So it's,
if you're watching it right now and you're actually a home seller, not an investor, just understand that people with no skin in the game like he is has no problem bolting out of a transaction the moment any kind of trouble arises. He has zero to lose by basically abandoning everything and not even answering your phone calls if he wanted to. So Susan put herself in such a bad situation. You can't help but feel bad for this person. And then just another reason to reinforce the idea that if you are a seller doing it on your own, you can encounter somebody like that and you can walk out without your pants. Like they will take everything in your pants included.
essentially you got back to zero out of pocket.
Yeah, and I've done a lot of deals like this, and this is where, you know, Jerry and I talked in the previous video about understanding how to structure a deal. Is that I gave her 110, she paid for closing costs, I took over a tenant, so I had no money, I had no requirement for money whatsoever. And then when she wanted the down payment, I go, no problem, let's figure out where that down payment is coming from. I looked at the cash flow and I go, oh, I could pay her $1,000 a month, essentially. And when she asked me for $10,000, I go,
Okay, it's some kind of an advertisement, so let's skip through the advertisement. I don't have a subscription, so we'll just have to suffer through it. But anyhow, okay, there we go. It's a short advertisement.
over the course of a year. She goes, yeah, no problem, I don't care when I get it.
Okay, so Susan is a mental case. Now, for those of you who are wholesalers, for those of you who are investors, just be aware this story, just like the story with Jose in his truck. It sounds fun, it sounds good, but he is selling you on an idea that it is easy. In reality, idiots like Susan are probably 1 out of 10, maybe even 1 out of 20. The rest of the people would be like, they would like the Jose story, they would laugh along with you with the Jose story. But the moment you started to throw in like principal only, you pay for this, you pay for that, they'll be like, whoa. Explain to me again how it's going to work on paper. So don't expect everybody, if you're a wholesaler or an investor, to be so financially illiterate as Susan is.
And I go, let's do it for a year. So, and you guys can pull, maybe what I'll do is I'll give Jerry a Dropbox link for that note, so you guys can actually see the note. You'll see Dell and Susan's name on it. You'll see the structure, the 375, 20 years of payments, principal only, and you'll see how I structured the down payment on the actual note. And you'll go, it's that simple.
And this brings a really good point up. Really, for me, and I'm sure you're this way too, I just come up with the high level terms. And then there are so many people that can then put all the paperwork in place. Like, you really shouldn't be stressing yourself out about that part. Learn how to put the terms together. Right. And then there's transaction coordinators or title people that really understand.
Transaction coordinators are huge. Title companies, closing attorneys, escrow officers. We have a list of about 300 escrow companies and closing attorneys across the country, all 50 states, that do sub-2 seller finance novation agreements. That's one of the older ones we miss was novation, but they do all of this stuff. You just got to go to the companies that do it. They do literally all the paperwork except for the purchase contract. So don't get
tripped up on, oh my gosh, how do I put a contract together that has everything I need in there? That part's easy.
In fact, I don't touch paperwork anymore.
Me neither.
I haven't touched paperwork in 5-6 years, and I rely on other people to do all that.
I literally
Okay. I do not know at what level of mastery you need to be to sign a contract with no details in it. I strongly disagree with them on this point. the devil is usually in the details. And when they're telling you that, like, as long as 67 view kind of 67 feet viewpoint works, the details are unimportant. Seriously? You're talking about a legal contract that will tie up your money for and basically could be disputed later. Let's just say that Susan wakes up or somebody talks sense into her, and halfway, let's just say they even start the process, and then she says, okay, let me hire a lawyer to look into it. If he didn't look into this contract and he doesn't even know what he's signing, number one, I do not think that no matter how close he is with a title company, that they will fill this paperwork out for him. It's not up to them. They're a third party. We're supposed to execute on a contract, not to structure it. That's number one. So he needs to have somebody on his team who is not related to the title company to put this together. But number two, is he really not looking at those details? What if Susan takes him to court later and tries to take her house back, even though he's fulfilling his obligations? If he doesn't know what he signed, he might have some unpleasant discoveries in front of him.
Like, here's my bullet list. Here you go, and they put it all together. And
Yeah, and I see people trip up about this kind of stuff. Like, well, hold on, I don't know how to do all the paperwork. I'm like, okay, but
You don't need to know how to do the paperwork. What you need to know is what needs to be in the paperwork and what doesn't need to be in the paperwork. So I disagree with both of them at this point. I think that maybe if it's your 600th transaction, you might be so well versed in everything that you only need a few top highlights to understand the deal. If it's your first or second or third deal, you need to understand the details because it is a legal document, and legal documents, when a seller gets pissed, tend to have lawyers and title companies looking at them from a legal standpoint. So it's better be 100% golden and kosher. Just saying, oh, don't worry about it. Do worry about it, because this is how you can lose that deal or even get kicked out of a property for which you potentially already paid down payment and interest payments on it, because you didn't understand the details of the deal.
you also don't know how to drill your own teeth, but you go to a dentist. Like, you also don't change your own oil, but you go to Jiffy Lube.
I would say that the thing that he is comparison that he is making are not relevant comparisons. It is not my job to know how to drill my own teeth, because that's not my business. My business is not drilling my own teeth. But as far as me making my millions and me having full undisputable control over the property, that control over the property rests in those legal papers. So it is my business to know those papers. That is the foundation of my business. This is how I guarantee the success of the operation. So I better know how to do those documents.
But like, why do you feel like you need to do the physical paperwork? You're a business.
You see, I think that his arguments, he's very talented as an orator, but he uses false equivalency a lot. So what I'm noticing as I'm watching his video more and more, he creates a false equivalency, and then he bases his argument based on a false equivalency.
Business owner, delegate it, right? So that's seller finance. And what I like about
what's cool, what I love about this story, and maybe you were going to say this, but I just want to make sure you point this out. This was a few years ago, and you like to hold, so you held this asset. Not only is it cash flowing, not only did you get depreciation write-off, which is amazing. I know you're looking it up right now. That thing's appreciated like 3 times over, hasn't it?
Not quite 3 times, but it's pretty big. And
you know whom he reminds me? Gary V. Gary V. I don't remember Gary V's full name, but his name is Gary V, and he sells wine, and I think that this guy reminds me of Gary V somehow.
The property what was funny about it is that people were criticizing me that I overpaid for the
Yeah.
property.
Okay, so they're going to look it
So that
up
we
in the
can
property appreciation
literally,
rate.
if they structured the deal and brought it to me, but because I had to structure the deal, I paid them 5.
Yeah.
So understanding how to see a seller that wants too much money and go, are you
So that's
an
another
avatar of
issue.
somebody in distress?
Yeah.
That's somebody that's like, I just want a higher number. And so you give them a higher number and you structure it so it cash flows and it pays down, you can be in a powerful position. Here's the thing. I paid the wholesaler on that deal $5,000.
Okay, so this is another part that I didn't understand. So he said that the property came as a $0 out of his own pocket. That was his statement number 1. Statement number 2 is that he paid the wholesaler $5,000.
I would have paid the wholesaler on that deal $50,000, literally, if they structured the deal and brought it to me.
Okay, so what he's saying is that he did pay the wholesaler $5,000, and he had the potential to pay him 50 if he had structured the deal instead of him doing it. Okay, question, based on the scenario with this Susan, so they agreed that he would pay the down payment, a $1,000 down payment within a year. Okay. All right, I understand how that could happen. So he didn't have any money out of pocket. Where did the payment for the wholesaler came from? Okay, Susan agreed to pay for the closing costs. So let's just say Susan paid $3,000 in closing costs. That didn't cost him anything. But the wholesaler got $5,000. Where did that money come from? Who gave the money, him or Susan? That he doesn't explain. And let's just say that the wholesaler did structure the deal. Where would $50,000 come from? Susan is surely enough is not giving it to him. So would he be out the $50,000 and still say that it cost him $0? That I'm not getting.
But because I had to structure the deal, I paid them 5.
Yeah.
So understanding how to see a seller that wants too much money and go, are you sure that's how much you want? Are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure? Okay, great.
So again, $5,000 here, potential $50,000 have to come out of somebody's pocket. And if he wants to do it 0%, like 0 cost to him, and Susan is hell is not cashing out her 401k to give him 50K, then where is the money for the wholesaler in this storyline?
If I could come up to 110, could we do terms? What are terms? Well, let me tell you a story about an F-150. Now what terms do you want? Oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. And then they tell you the terms. And what you've got to do is look at it and go, does it cash? Okay, cash and cash return. So if I put $10,000 into a house and at the end of the year, I not only got my $10,000 back, no, I'm sorry, I put $10,000 in and it gave me $10,000 in net income that year. That's 100% cash.
So he gave he gave 100,000, and at the end of the year he got 100,000. I'm not a mathematician, but I think his profit is 0 because he spent 100 to make 100, so his profit is 0. Correct me if I'm wrong, maybe I'm not getting it.
On cash return. Okay, so think about this. If I put $1,000 on this table and I walked out of the room and I came back in and there's $2,000 in here, that's 100%.
So that's not what happened though. If he gave that $1,000 to the second guy in a t-shirt and he came back and there was $1,000 laying on the table, then he just made $1,000 back, he made 0. The money, the down payment is not his, the down payment is the seller's. Again, maybe I'm not getting it. Now, he is a brilliant, obviously a brilliant wholesaler and he's a brilliant investor, and I'm not. So I'm not saying that he's wrong. I'm just saying I'm not getting this argument right now.
Cash on cash return. Well, I don't know where the money came from, but damn, I got 100% cash on cash return. So typically a buy and hold investor is looking for a minimum of 12% cash on cash return. For me, because I have so many opportunities, just like you, I won't look at it. There's a little known trick.
Right. Let's go ahead and turn this off. So it will continue to play a little bit for a moment. I'm going to cut it short for right now because it's already been a long enough video. I'm going to put the link to the video in the description. So go ahead and watch the whole video. And but I wanted to demonstrate the main argument of how or the brilliancy with which this dude is taking the seller and making that seller so emotionally disoriented and how it's illogically disoriented using his stories that they could be led like a child in any direction that he wants. Very good execution. Again, we're not going to watch the whole thing, otherwise we'll be here for 2 hours. If you have any comments, or if you want to explain to me some part that I didn't understand correctly, please feel free, because I'm trying to understand how to not exactly do what he does, because I think what he does is a little bit abusive in some cases, but at the very least to understand what he does and be able to execute it in a similar situations. So thank you so much, guys. I know I'm not a very smooth talker, and I know I'm not a very smooth presenter. My apologies. See you at the next video.